How are you guys doing? Today is Monday, December 13th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on Fletcher Cox. The elite starting defensive tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles turns 31 today, and my intention with this episode is, of course, to put a lot of focus and attention on the stats and numbers he was able to amass during his career, alongside the achievements and the accomplishments and the accolades he's been able to collect while playing for Mississippi State and the Philadelphia Eagles. If you're not familiar with Fletcher Cox, he stands at about 6'4". He's about 310 pounds. He is a Super Bowl champ. He is a 6-time Pro Bowler, and he is in 4 different seasons, he's been recognized as one of the very best players at his very own position. And just to get into the background of Fletcher Cox, he's originally from Yazoo City, Mississippi. He would go and play high school football there, of course, and he would go on to play college football in Mississippi State. Of course, he wouldn't leave home, or at least he wouldn't get that far from home. He would, of course, go on to play in Dan Mullen's first 3 seasons at Mississippi State. His very first season was 2009, Dan Mullen's first season there, and in his freshman season, Fletcher Cox would play all 12 of the games that he played all 12 of the games that Mississippi State played. That season, they would end up going 5-7 as they completely missed the bowl game. He would go on to finish with 29 tackles, even at 3.5 tackles for loss at the end of that season. Following 2009, he would return for his sophomore season at Mississippi State, and in that season, he would go on to play 12 games in a season in which Mississippi State would go on to finish with a 9-4 record after they beat Michigan in the Gator Bowl and finished as a top 15 team in the nation. Fletcher Cox would go on to finish with 29 tackles on the season, just as much as he had the prior year. He had 6.5 tackles for loss. He had 2.5 sacks, and he even forced his very first fumble his sophomore year. And following that season, in which he was able to win that first bowl game as a ranked team, he would return for his third and final year of eligibility, or he would return for his third and final year at Mississippi State, his junior season in 2011. In that season, Cox would go on to play every single game in a season in which our Mississippi State will go on to finish with a 7-6 record as they went 2-6 in the SEC. They did not finish the season ranked, but they would go on to beat Wake Forest by a touchdown in the Music City Bowl. In his junior season, Fletcher Cox would go on to finish with 56 total tackles on the season, which is almost double what he put up both of his first 2 seasons. He finished with 14.5 tackles for loss and 5 sacks at the defensive tackle position. He would go on to force his second career collegiate fumble and also pick up his very first fumble recovery that season. At the end of the 2011 season, even though Mississippi State wasn't ranked, Fletcher Cox would go on to be a first-team All-American in addition to being named to the first-team All-SEC. And he would go on to be taken with the 12th overall pick in the 2012 NFL Draft. Just for context, he was the second defensive tackle taken in that entire draft, as the first defensive draft was taken right ahead of him as Dontari Poe went from Memphis to the Kansas City Chiefs. Also looking at this draft, this was the draft in which Andrew Luck was taken with the first overall pick by Stanford. Other notable picks in this round, you had Chandler Jones going to the Patriots with the 21st pick, and you had Harrison Smith going from Notre Dame to the Vikings with the 29th pick in this round. Bobby Wagner, the elite linebacker for the Seattle Seahawks, was taken in the second round of this draft as well. But of course, just to get a bit of context as to the players he came into this league with. And he was drafted to the Philadelphia Eagles. He was their first-round draft pick, and ever since he has been a member of the Eagles. His debut season would be his age 22 season in 2012. In that season, he would start 9 of the 15 games he played as he earned his starting spot, in a season in which the Eagles finished with a 4-12 record. This would go on to be Andy Reid's final season with the Philadelphia Eagles, as a matter of fact. In the 15 games he played, Fletcher Cox would go on to finish with 39 tackles on the year. He would go on to force a fumble, and he would also go on to finish with 5.5 sacks at the defensive tackle position. He would go on to make the all-rookie team, and many people were starting to get a sense of how good Fletcher Cox was as a player. His second season in Philadelphia would see him become a full-time starter for the very first time in his career, and in his first full season as a full-time starter in his age 23 season in 2013, he started all 16 of the games he played in a season in which the Philadelphia Eagles would finish with a 10-6 record and win the NFC East in Chip Kelly's very first season coaching there. On the defensive end, or on the defensive tackle, while playing at the defensive end position, Fletcher Cox would go on to finish with 41 tackles on the season, as he also finished with 3 sacks. He also recovered a fumble as well, as he was starting to see himself become more incorporated into that Philadelphia Eagles offense. And following that season, the Philadelphia Eagles would go on to lose in the very first wild card matchup to the New Orleans Saints. That would be the lone time that Chip Kelly made the playoffs with the Eagles. Going into Fletcher Cox's third season with the Philadelphia Eagles and his second season as a starter, his age 24 season in 2014 would see him start all 16 of the games he played in a season in which the Eagles finished with a 10-6 record, the same record they had the previous year. This time they didn't make the playoffs. In the 2014 season, he would go on to finish with 61 tackles, which would be a career high for him at that point. He would also go on to force a fumble, recover 3 fumbles, and one of those fumble recoveries did go on to lead to a touchdown. He would also go on to finish with 4 sacks at the end of the year. After his third season in Philly, he would not be named a Pro Bowler. However, he would be named to the third team, or it would be named to the second team All-Pro for the very first time in his NFL career, which is still being recognized by authorities higher than you, saying that he was, or like higher than himself, saying that he was one of the best players in the NFL, especially at his position. I think from then people started seeing him in at least that light where he was at least one of the best players in his position. At least it was proven at that point. His fourth season in Philadelphia would be 2015, and in his age 25 season, he would start all 16 games for a Philadelphia Eagles team that would finish with a 7-9 record. This was the season where Chip Kelly got fired right before the final game of the season. And in the season, Fletcher Cox would be named a Pro Bowler for the first time in his NFL career. In those 16 games, he finished with a career high 71 tackles. He's never posted more than 71 tackles. He would post 11 tackles for loss. This is the first time he would ever post double-digit tackles for loss in a season. He would also go on to force 3 fumbles and recover 2. He also finished the 2015 season with 9.5 sacks, which at that point was the most sacks that he'd ever put together in a season. In 2015, in addition to being named a Pro Bowler for the very first time, he was named to the NFL second team All-Pro for the second time in his NFL career. And even though the Eagles didn't make the playoffs, now Fletcher Cox was definitely starting to be a menace at that position. His fifth season in Philadelphia would be his age 26 season in 2016. And in that season, he would start all 16 games for the 4th year in a row. And he did all this in a season where the Eagles would finish with a 7-9 record, repeating what they did the prior season. And this was Doug Peterson's very first year as the Eagles coach. This year, they failed to make the playoffs after they had the 4th best record in their division. But in the 16 games that the Eagles played, Fletcher Cox would go on to finish with 43 tackles on the season as he was officially moved to a defensive tackle this year. He would see his 9.5 sacks drop to 6.5, but he would still go on to force a fumble, recover a fumble as well, as he also finished with 9 tackles for loss on the season. And in 2016, like I said, he would be named a Pro Bowler for the second time in his career. So by the end of his first 5 seasons with the Eagles, and by the end of his first time playing fully playing defensive tackle, he was a 2-time Pro Bowler and a 2-time All-NFL player. Of course, this leads into his 6th season with the Philadelphia Eagles, his age 27 season in 2017. In that season, Fletcher Cox would start all 14 of the games he played in a season in which the Eagles would finish with the best record in the NFC East, with a 13-3 record, winning 6 more games than they had won the prior season, making the playoffs for the very first time in a 4-year stretch. And in the 2017 regular season, he would go on to post 26 combined tackles in those games. He also was able to finish with 5 tackles for loss, as he was also able to force a fumble, recover 2 fumbles. He had a fumble recovery touchdown, the second of his NFL career, and he would also post 5.5 sacks for the Philadelphia Eagles. In 2017, Fletcher Cox would be named to the Pro Bowl for the 3rd year in a row at defensive tackle, and he was named to the second team All-Pro for the 3rd time in his NFL career. Since 2017, he has not been named to the NFL All-Second Team, but following that regular season, the Philadelphia Eagles would go on to beat the Atlanta Falcons by 5 in the divisional rounds. They would go on to beat the Minnesota Vikings 38-7 in the NFC Championship game before they went on to Super Bowl 52 to beat the New England Patriots 41-33, where Nick Foles won the Super Bowl MVP. And in the Super Bowl, Fletcher Cox was able to register a tackle. But of course, it would take Fletcher Cox 6 seasons in Philadelphia to win the only championship ring that he has to date. But at the same time, Fletcher Cox was a very big reason, a big part of the reason that they were there. And in that very same season, by the time he won a ring, he was a 3-time Pro Bowler and a 3-time member of the second team All-Pro, proving that he was one of the best defensive tackles in all of the league. And following that 2017 season, once he became a champ, he would return for his 7th season with the Philadelphia Eagles, his age 28 season in 2018. In that season, Fletcher Cox would go on to start all 16 of the games he played in a season in which the Eagles finished with a 9-7 record. They would finish second in the NFC East. However, they would make the playoffs this season. In the 16 games he played, he was able to finish with 46 tackles on the year. He posted a career high 12 tackles for loss. He would also post a career high 10.5 sacks in 2018, the only season in his career in which he's posted at least double-digit sacks. He would finish with a forced fumble and a fumble recovery on the year. In 2018, he would be named a Pro Bowler for the 4th year in a row, and he would go on to be named to the NFL first team All-Pro for the only time that he's been named to the first team in his career. This is the 4th time he's been named to an All-NFL team in a 5-year span. And since 2018, Fletcher Cox has not made an NFL All-Pro team. But following that 2018 season, the Eagles would beat the Bears by 1 in the wild card round before losing by 6 to the New Orleans Saints. This would be the season in which the New England Patriots beat the Los Angeles Rams after the Rams beat the Saints. But following his 7th season in Philly, he would come back for his 8th season with the Philadelphia Eagles, his age 29 season in 2019. And in that season, he would start all 16 games for the 6th time in his NFL career. He did this in a season where the Eagles would finish with a 9-7 record for the 2nd year in a row. This time they would win the NFC East and make the playoffs for the 3rd year in a row. In that regular season, he would go on to post 40 tackles in the 16 games he played. He also forced 3 fumbles and recovered a fumble as well. Not to mention that he also finished with 3.5 sacks and 5 tackles for loss. At the conclusion of the 2019 season, Fletcher Cox was named a Pro Bowler for the 5th consecutive year. It's very tough for almost any Pro Bowler ever to be named a Pro Bowler for half a decade straight, but Fletcher Cox is one of the few players in NFL history that was able to do it. And following that 2019 season, the Philadelphia Eagles would go on to lose in the wild card round to the Seattle Seahawks, and the 2019 season would end, or the 2019 playoffs were ended by the Kansas City Chiefs being the last team standing as Patrick Mahomes won his first title. And this transitions us to the 2020 season, which was impacted by COVID, but every team was still able to play all 16 of their games just without fans. In Fletcher Cox's 9th season with the Philadelphia Eagles in his age 30 season, he would start all 15 of the games he played in a season in which the Eagles would finish in a season where the Eagles finished with a 4-11-1 record, finishing with the worst record in the NFC East. In his age 30 season, he would go on to be named a Pro Bowler for the 6th year in a row, as he posted 41 tackles, 6.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. And as well, he also had 9 tackles for loss. And in that 2020 season, like I said, the Eagles would miss the playoffs, but he would go on to make the Pro Bowl for the sixth time. And since 2020, he hasn't made the Pro Bowl since, but I mean, we're still waiting for the Pro Bowl selections this year. But as of right now, he is a reigning six-time Pro. He's made the last six Pro Bowls. And of course, this transitioned us to where he is right now, as Fletcher Cox is turning 31. He's serving as a prime contributor for a Philadelphia Eagles team that is sitting with a 6-7 record. Their playoff hopes are still alive at this very point in the year. And at this moment, Fletcher Cox is really just sitting on 25 tackles on the year. Not to mention that he does have 3 sacks and he does have a forced fumble at this point. But looking at the body of work that Fletcher Cox was able to amass, especially while the Eagles defense was incredibly formidable, even when they're not, that level of consistency to really set yourself apart in a very tough position and to consistently be named to the Pro Bowl, especially when he's playing the same position as Aaron Donald. I know that's more than likely the reason that he wasn't named to the first team All-Pro. But other than that, I do think that looking at Fletcher Cox's career in a nutshell, I think it's really tough to argue against Fletcher Cox being an elite defensive tackle in the NFL. I want to thank the college and Pro Football Reference websites. I also want to thank the NCAA, the NFL websites, as well as the various Wikipedia pages I pulled up for the stats and the figures that I needed for this episode, because I wouldn't be able to do it without them, obviously. I also want to thank everyone for listening to all 16, 17 minutes of this piece. I do hope all is well. And if you ever get a chance, I would recommend watching Fletcher Cox. He wears number 91 for the Philadelphia Eagles on the defensive side. And with that said, I want to thank everyone for listening. I hope all is well. Once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are done, I'm going to come back tomorrow. And of course, that will be on Tuesday, December 14th. And at the same time, hopefully I'll have more to talk about with Fletcher Cox around when this time comes around next year. Thanks for listening to my piece. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with another episode tomorrow. Peace out.